Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. The timing couldn't be better, as the papal conclave is meeting in Rome. We have someone from Rome meeting us here virtually, Francesco Sisci, here to talk about what are the implications for China and the other Asian countries coming out of this election of a new pope.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll start with the big picture and the themes, and then we go down to Asia and also maybe the technicalities of the vote for those interested. I'll keep it short so that there could be more questions. So I would say I would start with who pays attention to the Pope? What are we looking at? And possibly we should think only of Trump's picture of him as a pope to tell us that is a really important position, that even the most powerful person in the world doesn't want to be just president. He wants to be the pope. And in fact, here we have about 1.4 billion faithful Catholics. These are different account qualification, but at least these are the baptized, the people who are Catholic baptized, and it is the single, by far, the single largest unitary religion in the world. And besides those 1.4 billion people, 20% of the global population about, who pay attention, who are loyal to the Pope, there are people who are attentive to the Pope, and this is about 1 billion other Christians. There are Protestants and Orthodox, and they are all divided, different denomination, different groups, but they are all in their own way attentive, pay attention to what happens in Rome. And then there are 2 billion Muslims who, of course, have been in war with Christians for over 1,000 of years, and they've been controversy. They lived together with the Christian world for over 1,000 of years, and especially now with Pope Francis, they've grown to pay a lot of attention to the Pope, to the Vatican, to Rome, and there is a massive outreach of the Catholic Church to the Muslim world, and this is bound to continue. So this is over half of the total population, which has somehow of a direct stake in the Pope's election. And so that makes him important for everybody, because if half of the world population pays attention to him, even those who are not so attentive or not so affected, well, in a way or another, they are affected. So this is, I think, a first important element to see how relevant is this Pope election. And then I would say let's go to the numbers of what is the organization of the church, the cadres, the global cadres of the church, which is massive. We have exactly, these are numbers by 23, 400,000, over 400,000 priests, almost 600,000 nuns, over 50,000 deacons, and plus we have many thousand more volunteers in one capacity or another. That is 1 to 2 million people who are actively at the service of the church in different capacity, in different directions. So it is a massive army of cadres, to put it in Chinese terms. And then there are the officials. We have 5,630 bishops, and as so these are the guys who are chosen directly by the Pope. Of course, there is an office in the Vatican preparing all the human resources data, so to speak, but they are supposedly not only supposedly, they are in effect chosen by the Pope, who issues a direct order, a direct appointment to each of them. There are in total 254 cardinals. That is cardinals and under 38 electors, cardinals who are electors of these 254. Cardinals over 80 are still cardinals. They take part in the discussions. They have taken part in the discussions, in the ongoing discussion to choose, to select the Pope, but they don't join the conclave. This is limited to cardinals who are below 80. They can elect and be elected. And here there is a small mistake. 135 attending the conclave. Apparently, the actual number this morning was 133. Today, the conclave just started. 133. And then they are coordinated by the Curia, which are the offices of the church in Rome, and there are different departments. The most important, that is prime minister slash foreign affairs, is the secretary of state, is the number 2. Then there are other important departments, say propaganda fide, which is the department on the spread of the faith, and then there is the department of the bishops, that is one on organizing the different bishops and setting up and keeping in touch. So this is the thing, this is the machinery. Now, this Pope will be chosen depending on the issues of the church. These 135 people will start discussion, have started discussion today on the issues of the church. And the first and foremost is Francis' legacy. And from the discussion in the past few days, we know that the cardinals were quite divided on how to assess this legacy. Was he too disruptive, and therefore we must go back to something more traditional, or was not enough disruptive? So we should go even further. And also another issue is, what kind of pope? Do we want a pope for the church, concentrating on the issues of the church, and there are many, or on the issues of the world? The issues of the world are social issues, and Francis paid a lot of attention to the social issues, on the environment, on the peace and the social divide was very important, or the issues of the church. So where is a balance? And this is another issue that is relevant, although it is more esoteric, is what is the assessment on Vatican Council II. The Vatican Council II that was set up finished in 66, if I'm not wrong, when early 60s, was very important and changed the rules, many rules of the present church. Before the council, for instance, the Mass was in Latin. Now it is in local languages, just to give a short example. In the past, conclave, there were many cardinals who took part or were there during Vatican Council II. So they had their own interpretation of what went on there. Now all the cardinals in the conclave actually joined the church after the conclave. So what do you do with this legacy? Then we were saying, what is the matter of the social, the world? It is a social divide, all wars and political tension. The moral issues are what is the church to do with the LGBT, with women's participation, married priest, what do you do with the family? These are how I would say moral issues and social issues. And then two last issues. The issue of synodality, being together. Pope Francis paid a lot of attention to the synodality, being together, that is listening to what everybody says from the peripheries, that is not just the Pope telling everybody off, but a lot of process of listening. And so how do you implement this synodality? Or you just put it aside and you return to the Pope who will be the emperor of the faith? I think there is a certain majority that is, at least here, this is clearly more clear about wanting more synodality. And through this synodality, tackling the issues of unity. The conservatives now talk more about unity, that the church should be united, that is, we should listen to the Pope. And they say, so to speak, the liberal types want more synodality, which should discuss more together. And then there is an issue of geography of the church. And here we are in our better territory. That is, where should the church focus? Pope Francis was concentrated on Asia. He traveled to Asia more than any other pope in the past put together. He tried to open to China, and where he had some results, but not too convincing, how to put it, not too much, but I would argue that there were indeed some results. So this, little is better than nothing. Yet there is a bigger problem at hand. That is, where should the Pope concentrate? Because there are two kinds of challenges, and very different. One is Europe, America, Australia, the old, so to speak, Western countries. Here, Catholics are a majority or a significant minority. Say the United States, they are 20 to 30% of the population, the single largest religion, quite influential. But what do? Do you want to develop there, defend your turf there, and what do you do with the two main challenges that the Catholic Church faces there? That is, one is secularism. A lot of people claim to be Catholics but don't go to church, don't practice don't help the church, so secularism. Or the other, there are people who are actually quite serious about their faith, but they are feeling not satisfied with what they get from the church, and so they go for evangelical churches, and this is quite strong in Latin America and also in North America, where many Latinos who are traditionally Catholic, baptized Catholics, actually go to church but go to evangelical church. So there is an issue of how does the Catholic Church, how can the Catholic Church meet the needs of the common people? Or you concentrate on Africa. Africa is very interesting for the Catholics because you have the fastest growing population and the fastest growing number of conversions. So how do you deal with that? But here you have different challenges. There is Muslim persecution. In Nigeria, it is massive. There have been hundreds in recent years of Catholics and priests being killed and slaughtered by by Muslim extremists, Muslim terrorists, and also on the wings there are still evangelicals who are also growing. Just in a nutshell, why evangelicals are spreading so fast? I mean, it takes 10 years to have a Catholic priest, because he has to study very hard for at least 10 years. And you need only a Bible, the distribution of a Bible, to have an evangelical pastor. And so, it's much faster. Or you want to concentrate on Asia. Asia is home of 60% of the population, and if you take out the Philippines, which is honestly almost an extension of Latin America into Asia, then the percentage of Catholics in the normal population is pretty low. It's about 2-3% per country. You get a higher percentage in South Korea or Vietnam for different reasons, where the Catholic population is about 10-20%. And then the single largest community is in India, where you have a very ancient Catholic community dating back to the 1st century AD, and with a population that between 25 to 60 million, depending on how you calculate. And so that means what are you gonna do? What you're gonna do? These directions, but I think I've covered already the kind of direction. In this, I would say Asia is divided in 3 areas. There is China, there is India, and then there are the Muslim areas. And for each, the church may need different mindsets. I wouldn't say strategy, because it's and even in Asia, even in countries like Thailand, that in theory should be free, actually is difficult, because the Buddhist presence is quite strong. It is forbidden to try to convert to Catholicism. And there is a Catholic church in Thailand, but they are Chinese who have coming from Vietnam mostly, but also from Yunnan originally, and who converted, or who were already Catholics when they started being there. Lastly, I would say the mechanics of the conclave, and then So we will have 133 cardinals secluded. They will have 4 votes per day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. There will be a mass in the morning, a mass at midday, and then dinner. And all cell phones, means of communication with the external space are interrupted. There can be only external help can be called in only for emergencies, which are medical emergencies. These guys are pretty old, so they can have medical emergencies, but there are 2 medical doctors on staff, and they will have first to certify that this is an emergency and that the seals have to be broken. If a 2/3 majority is required, and that it means 89 votes at least. If a majority is not reached by the 33rd vote, that is in 8 days, then you have only ballots between the 2 front runners. Before that, you can have you can change people, you can converge on that, on A and B, and then the afternoon it can be C and D. But after the 33rd, only the 2 front runners are expected to be voted. Before speaking a little bit about Parolin, I will go a little bit on the Pope. The Pope will choose his name and will greet the people of Rome from the balcony. And these 2 first signs will kind of tell us the direction which he wants to be the Pope. So what he wants to do as a Pope. And the Pope, over a period of 1, 2, 3 years, he will select all the heads of the Curia, and Parolin, who is presently Secretary of State, if it is not elected, he could be replaced, and so will be everybody else. Parolin now presently is the leading candidate, but there is a saying in Rome that who enters as a pope exits as a cardinal. So being a front runner many times doesn't help. But in theory, the church, especially now that has so many differences, so many dividing agendas, will try to find somebody that will try to cover both ends. So the church is for dialogue internally, not only with externally. So they don't pick a divisive person, a divisive personality. And usually priests and bishops and cardinals are not divisive. But still, there are many divisions. In theory, why is Parolin a front runner? Because he has been working closely with the Pope for over 10 years, but he's, how can I put it in political terms, center left. So he's not radically left, he's not the right. So he could be amenable to also the right and to the left. Of course, so to speak, in political terms, the center left and the radical left and the radical right may not want Parolin. So because it's a 2/3 majority, it's not a simple majority, he may not get the votes and somebody else will be chosen. Why Parolin is important for China? Because he was the one who led the dialogue with China for many, many years, since 98 and 99, as Under Secretary of State, which is strange function in. And then as Secretary of State, he was the one who signed the temporary agreement. So if he is elected, possibly the church will continue with the present policy with China. If he is not elected, everything will be up to the next pope, of course. Here I am. I finished.
Thank you very much. Wow. Okay, so maybe I'll take my prerogative as the organizer here to ask you a question. For those of us who may not have been paying attention to the ongoing dialogue between Parolin and the Chinese, can you basically explain what are the outlines of the temporary agreement, and what are the big issues in the China Holy See relationship?
Yeah. It's very complicated and full of nitty-gritty. So forgive me if I'm a bit too rough, but if you want, I can go into some specifics. Basically, it is about the appointment of the bishops, because the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church is different from any other Christian church. That is, the bishops have to be in communion with the Pope. That is, they have to be ordained by the Pope. And one ongoing problem with the Catholic Church from the onset, that is a problem that is ongoing for 2,000 years, is the rivalry, the confines of power between secular power, temporal power, and church power. And so on China, of course, it is more difficult because in the West we had centuries of experience in dealing with the Pope. Every king, every president, every government in the West had to deal with the Pope, and in the end, the Pope remained. All the temporal powers are gone. And China, as you know better than me, never had that problem because the emperor was the son of heaven. So here there was a funny compromise that made the compromise possible. That is, the Communist Party, being a Communist Party, that is, being atheist, couldn't claim, in theory, to have any saying on the appointment of bishops, because otherwise it wouldn't be atheist, it wouldn't be Marxist. So in theory, this opened the doors or the gates to the agreement, because the church doesn't claim any secular power. The Marxist, the Communist power doesn't claim any godly power. So in theory, there are two areas that could be combined in the selection of bishops. But of course, this has to be embodied, incarnated in a single man who has to be loyal both to China and to the Pope. Again, in the history of the Church, this is not such a big thing, as for instance, Napoleon introduced an oath to the bishops, to the priests, and they had to plead an oath to the emperor. That was the emperor of France. So the Church had a lot of experience in dealing with that. So they had the whole thing, an whole arsenal that but China was very new and is still in a difficult position. So it is the choice of the. It is about the choice of the bishops. How do you choose them? Where do you choose them? And then the dioceses, how you move them, is all complication. But say the theological differences have been solved, but there is a lot of practical, very, very practical differences and one very practical difference is that China, being very important for the Church, this is something that the Pope handled himself directly. He wanted to be clear about who are the bishops in China. He doesn't handle personally, all the thousands of bishops in the world, but on China, he wanted to be clear. So that, on the Chinese side, implied, okay, if the Pope wants to know who are the Chinese bishops, then Xi Jinping has to know too. But can you imagine Xi Jinping doesn't know anything about the Catholic Church? So everything has to, becomes very, very slow.
Okay, there are a number of questions, so why don't we get to work on some of the audience questions? First one is very interesting and very relevant in today's world. William Henry Tennyson asks, there is widespread interference in democratic elections these days. What interference will be most prevalent at the conclave?
Very interesting, very, very important question. Thank you. This is, of course, everybody wanted to interfere, but again, the Church has a lot of experience about interferences. There were popes who were made and removed by powers, Spain and France being historically the main powers influencing the Church, Austria or whatever, the Germanic Empire, the Holy German Empire. So, and for this reason, they have the conclave. That is, these people are cut off from any interference. Nobody knows, nobody is supposed to know what goes on there. And these are big electors, and in theory, they don't have to respond to anybody. They are sworn to secrecy. So in theory, they are pretty independent. Also because these guys, whatever you want to say, the atmosphere is very religious. These guys, or at least most of these guys, joined the clergy because they were believers, they were true believers. And although some may have grown out of faith, the atmosphere is very religious. They have to take the Eucharist every day, maybe twice a day. I don't know the technicalities. So there is a lot of soul searching and the process is also done in this soul searching manner. They're also old people, close to the day of their reckoning. So I would say pretty independent.
Great. And this is a perfect moment to segue into the second question, which when we were chatting before the talk, you already answered. The question is, have you seen Edward Berger's film Conclave? And we know that you have. The question is, how accurate is it? And of course, even in that cloistered, isolated, um, religious gathering, the movie managed to pack quite a few different scandals in there all in the same time. Is that
Yeah.
accurate? Does it really happen like that?
Yes, 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 yes. I think. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in a conclave. I'm not a priest. I've never been, but I think it is quite accurate. I've been told it's quite accurate because also what happens is you are very religious and therefore you really believe in what happens. And sometimes, you know, when you are a true believer and you're not cynical, you get carried away, and it happens. I so yes, and in the search of what you believe is the highest truth, you may do a lot of things wrong. So yes, as for this reason, as the Catholics say, the Church is both holy and um, greatly sinful.
Okay, and then we come down to the hard truths of geopolitics. Lucas Gajos asks, would you please comment on the Holy Say ROC PRC triangle? In your opinion, has the deal with Beijing on appointing bishops brought satisfying enough results? Should the absence of President Lai at the papal funeral be seen through the prism of this agreement?
Yes, definitely it has. Then there was some kind of uneasy and not perfect compromise, I would say, because um, the Chinese wanted to send a delegation in, apparently, allegedly, and but they wanted the exclusion of the Taiwan delegation, and the Vatican said that this is impossible. We don't have formal relations, and we don't have formal relations because um, the, the Vatican said we are ready to move the the office that in Beijing anytime. We are ready to have some kind of compromising space. There is a representative office in Hong Kong. We can move the representative office from Hong Kong to Beijing, and Beijing always turned down these offers. And so he said, we don't have diplomatic relations, so we cannot turn down a Taiwanese delegation. But um, in agreement with whatever, trying to please, at least partially please, Beijing, they toned down the delegation. That is, um, they didn't have the president in, but they had the former vice president, who is also Catholic and also attended the previous funerals of Pope John Paul II. So yes, there is a Taiwan angle there.
Francesco, do you know, was Beijing offered the opportunity to send some kind of delegation, just that they would have to be there alongside the Taiwan delegation? I mean, they do it at the Olympics. Why couldn't they do it at the Vatican?
Because exactly, there is a technicality also there. Taiwan in the Olympics accepts to pay to play second fiddler, so to speak. That is, they say China,
Taipei.
brackets Taipei, right? But in this case, it wouldn't be fair and wouldn't be impossible. I mean, the Chinese would be, China Beijing, so to speak, because there is a full-fledged ambassador in Rome, and so it wouldn't be, on what grounds you cancel the embassy, Taiwan embassy, in return for nothing, because the Chinese didn't offer anything in return, so
Right.
it didn't pan out. Having said that, I think there was a fault on both sides. Both sides were faulty because they knew this day was coming, and I'm not speaking of years, but I'm speaking of months, and because once you had the Pope in the hospital, it was quite clear that his health was not too good. So they had to prepare. My sense is that nobody took it too seriously, and that's how it happened.
Okay. And while we're talking about this and talking about the film, which I thought was pretty good, pretty mesmerizing, um, the question of the bishops, there's also this thing that would appear, this phenomenon that appeared in the film of indeed a cardinal appointed by the Pope in pectore. Now, in any kind of deal between the Vatican and Beijing, would they deal with that, or is that something that only the Pope is ever supposed to know? Like if I were to ask you, are there bishops appointed in pectore? You might know, but you might not, have it confirmed. And we know that there used to be, maybe I think he died, but there was that guy in Sichuan.
Yeah, there are usually it's not bishops, it's cardinals in
Oh, I
pectore.
see. Okay.
There is a difference, of course, because the cardinals are electors.
Okay.
Um, and cardinals, to be very specific, they get the only ones who get a Vatican passport, so they can travel to Rome without
Ah,
asking for visa freely.
okay.
And this is technically impossible with China.
Right.
So
But
you
but
can,
I remember
yeah,
when you were in Beijing, we're talking years ago now,
yes,
when there were still people
yes,
who had contact with the Vatican, maybe even before
yes,
liberation. There was a belief that there was a
a
cardinal
cardinal. Yeah,
protectorate in
there was a
West.
big, there was, yes, but if that is the case, you have to smuggle this guy out of China.
To be
And
ordained. Yeah.
no, no,
Okay.
no, not to be ordained,
Oh,
to take part in the consultations,
oh,
and that would be hard. So
okay.
what I'm saying is that whatever happened before, it was true, not
Not,
true, we don't know. But if now, for whatever reasons, the next pope were to appoint anybody, cardinal, impactor, without disclosing it, that is close to the vest, uh, then you would have some practicalities. How do you move him out? And if he's a priest, he will be in the radars. He must be a priest, because this is the minimum requirement. He can not be a bishop, but he must be a priest. So I don't think this is very realistic,
okay.
for China at least.
Okay. Then we have two more questions, actually quite a few more, but I'm going to consolidate two of them because they're similar. Alan and Kristen are asking what will the impact be at the level of just ordinary Chinese worshipers uh, of Catholicism in China, and how important are financial issues? And Kristen says, has China previously interfered with the activities of the Catholic Church in China? Similar to the interference with the Dalai Lama and Tibetan Buddhism.
The Dalai Lama Yes, there has been interference. Similar to that, no, because the structure, because of the structure of the church, I would say, and I would say also because I tried to follow, because also the church behaved very differently from how the Dalai Lama and his followers behaved vis-a-vis Beijing. So very different. Both the structure is different, very different behavior. So not the same thing, not the same thing. Financial, what is about financial?
Yeah.
There is a big problem with the finances, because the two main fundings from the Vatican, I think 60% came from United States. There were famously rich diocese of Chicago, which was far richer than the Vatican itself. But all these trials, accusations of harassment, children, left them really extremely poor. So there is that source of money has drained. Also, another important source of money came from Germany, because they have a special they have a special agreement with the German states, and faithfully, if they want to join the church, they have to pay a certain amount of taxes to the church directly, etc., etc. And there have been a drain there. So yes, money will be a problem for the church, because they need money. How they were going to solve it, I don't know. It's going to depend by the Pope, on the new Pope. Yeah, and another questions, I don't remember.
Yeah, there were it was simply what do you expect at the level of ordinary Chinese worshipers?
This
Well,
is
of course,
yeah.
you know, of course, once upon a time, the priests and bishops who expressed loyalty to the Pope, they were persecuted, obviously, during the Cultural Revolution, and some ordinary believers were as well. But that was, you know, that's not the stand of the current situation right now so much. But they still do disagree on certain bishops, right? Or
Yeah, I think that there are two levels. This is very interesting, and this is crucial. Two levels. One is the impact of the new Pope on the Chinese who are already Catholics, who are already faithful, registered, and there might be some friction, but at the end of the day, I think they are quite minor compared, especially with the past. More interesting is the impact of the Pope, and especially Francis, with the ordinary Chinese, which has been massive and totally new. Before Francis, mostly, I mean, I has experienced, and even talking to particators, normal Chinese wouldn't know who was the Pope, what was the Pope, what was the Catholics, etc. And with Francis, there has been an interest. Now I cannot gauge, but there has been an interest. And I saw some statistics, I don't know how accurate, that was that at the day the Pope died, despite the fact that China didn't cover the news immediately, the death of the Pope was the most searched item on Chinese internet. So this is very intriguing to me. Very intriguing. But this could be an issue of concern for the party, of course.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, another question. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. Do you have a feeling that some of the contenders for the Pope position might want to reverse Pope Francis's stance on China?
Might. My sense now is that there is a consensus, not to reverse, because there have been some results, although not enormous, but there has been a lot of investment by the church, and so my guess is that this issue could be put in the back burner, so to speak. Yes, you carry on, but maybe you pay attention to other things, and it will depend at the end of the day on the experience of on the personality of the Pope, because one thing of the Pope is that he is the closest person to God, and so he will have to search his conscience for directions.
Thank you. Okay, and now we have a question that's quite philosophical in its approach. I'll read it. There is a theory that two major blocks of interest are in opposition. The liberal globalist camp, which promotes a progressive agenda, and the traditionalist camp, which takes a long-term civilizational approach. In the current era of so-called dark enlightenment, quote unquote, and a retreat from liberal values, the traditionalists are said to be gaining ground. Do you agree with this theory? Can China be seen as part of the globalist camp and therefore in opposition to the traditionalist club, or does it stand apart as a separate force?
I tend to disagree to the approach. I think is a little bit too simplistic, um, uh, and and I think things are mixed, very very mixed, and fortunately or unfortunately, things are more difficult to define in this pattern. Also because I would say Trump and President Trump has confused all matters, and perhaps we will have a pope that will confuse it further. So who knows?
Oh, that'll be fun. Well, or maybe they'll end up being the same person, like Trump using AI to portray himself as the Pope. Okay, here's a good question from Sean, who says, I actually play the organ um, at the cathedral in Beijing and can say there is quite a lot of loyalty to and affection for the Pope, especially Francis. Prayers for him during the Mass, and even life-size cardboard pictures of him around the place. They were all posting eulogies for the Pope on WeChat following his death. My question is about the level of China expertise in the Vatican. The Chinese bishops are unable to go and meet the Pope in person. Actually, a few of them have, but very few.
Right.
And I just wonder how much understanding there really is in Rome about conditions on the ground. How exactly do they communicate? I can't imagine there are any unmonitored channels. The Cardinal of Hong Kong has been to Beijing a couple of times and seems to be quite an important link at the moment. Is he the main source of China
No,
expertise from the Vatican
no,
point of view? Oh,
no,
okay.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no. Actually, it's not true. There is a lot of expertise. There are lots of Chinese priests who have from China who now work in the Vatican, and as some of the people dealing with China, but not only with China, is that the Church, the Vatican knows about China more and in more detail than, say, about the diocese of Chicago. Why? Because you have a strange phenomenon that is particularly just typical of China, that is every faithful in China feels entitled to write directly to the Pope and directly to the Vatican, bypassing the bishop and his priest. Usually for Catholic faithful, there is a hierarchy. You should talk to your priest, to your parishioner, and then if you are not satisfied, talk to the bishop. But usually it's the parishioner who talks to the bishop, so you never see the bishop. Imagine the Pope. But in China, the Chinese write in all kinds of languages, some even in Latin, English, Chinese, Italian, even in Latin, directly to the Vatican. So there is a problem of being flooded by too much information. So there is a lot of knowledge. The problem there is that there is too much knowledge and it's hard to know what's what. So the Vatican would like to have somebody in Beijing who could help sort out the mess. And definitely, I must say, Hong Kong has historically been helpful, maybe not that much anymore. And definitely my sense is that they know in Hong Kong know less than they actually know in Rome. But then there is a problem of everything, that knowledge is quality, not quantity now. But quality of knowledge, is a very difficult and again maybe philosophical question.
Great. And we have perfect timing here. We have one more question, and we're almost out of time for our talk as well. So I'll ask the question. Is there a possibility, and probably we should ask if there is, how much of a possibility of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the Vatican, or technically the Holy See?
In theory, yes. In practice, I don't see that possibility because China, Beijing is not keen on establishing, not because the Holy See drags its feet, but because Beijing doesn't want it. Why doesn't want it? I don't know. If you want me to guess, is that if you have a nuncio, this is the name of the ambassador, the Chinese ambassador in Beijing, it could be problematic. It could be problematic for Beijing. So this is those thousands of letters that now go to Rome could translate in thousands of people that for one reason or another want to talk to the nuncio here, which is one of the problems of this special relationship, of the special entity of the Vatican. That is, it is a foreign entity, looking at it from the Chinese point of view, but interested in the lives of common Chinese. So how do you sort it out? In theory, they have a theological differences, but in practice, how do you deal with that? China doesn't have enough experience as it may be scared, and then it creates also other problems, because if you take out the Taiwan embassy from Rome, you diplomatically isolate Taiwan. So you push Taiwan into a corner, and then Taiwan may decide, okay, then I'll declare independence, and then I'll try to have my own diplomacy, and then declare independence that puts China in another corner. So it's difficult, extremely difficult to navigate through this. And so I must say, the fact that China and Parolin and a small group of people managed to navigate this extremely, extremely difficult position. Gives credit to these guys who are, I think, some of the best diplomats in the world.
Fascinating. And of course we should mention that you have interviewed these players, Parolin and indeed the late Pope himself. So we're very honored that you could come share your wisdom with us. Oh, quick question. Is the Catholic population in China managing to grow despite all these challenges? Do we know?
Again, difficult to say. Officially, no. Unofficially, yes. And I would say my sense, officially, there are 6 to 8 million people. Unofficially, some people claim 20 to 25. I would say 20 to 25 is really difficult because it's not easy to be Catholic, you see. It's evangelical, yes, you read a few lines in the Bible and you claim, oh, okay, I'm Christian, and in some even claim to be a pastor. But Catholics is a little bit more complicated. But I would say what is very interesting is there is a lot and of growing interest, both in Christianity and in the cultural Catholicism, I would say. Catholicism as a cultural element. You can be not Catholic, but be interested in the Catholic, culture, and yeah. So, and by some estimates, there could be hundreds of millions of Chinese who claim to be Christians or pseudo-Christians, as the Catholics would call them. That is, they carry the cross and they pay attention to the Pope. So this is a very interesting phenomenon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Francesco. This has been great. And the timing was really good. And so do you want to make your fearless forecast now? Who do you think will be the new Pope?
I can say who I hope will be the new Pope.
Oh.
I'm rooting for Parolin. I've known him for many, many years, 26 years to be precise, or 27. So I root for him. I think he's the right mediation between all the different pulls and pushes. He's a very good man. He's a very good priest. I would say an episode, and I know him firsthand, and it was in some talks. There was a slip. There was a slip by a Chinese official. I wouldn't call it an error, but it was a slip. If he had used that slip, that slip could have been advantageous to the Vatican, but would have damaged that particular official. And once he realized that, he tried by all means to save the official against the interest of the church and his personal interest, because he would be in a better position. So, and I think that taught me a lot, that personally taught me a lot, and gained my really undeserving, unwielding admiration, because he put the other person really before himself and before the church. And in my idea, this is the role that could have the church and should have the church, because in a moment where we are fighting to wars, on the verge of a third war between India and Pakistan, and with growing tensions every day, we want somebody who help mediate without having a stake and without wanting a stake. UN has disappeared, doesn't work. And maybe the Holy See could do that. And I do know that Parolin has the staff for it. But of course, now my pledge doesn't work because they are all in conclave, so nobody will listen.
And also, if you call him Pope, then he won't be Pope, right? Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about the contenders, William Henry Tennyson says his favorite is Cardinal Tagle to be the first Asian Pope. Of course, he hails from the Philippines. Now, here's a question: what are the chances of that, of him? And he's actually ethnic Chinese, isn't he? Even though he's from the Philippines.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
half
half Chinese.
Chinese. Okay. Does he have any understanding of China? I mean, could he, does he?
I don't know. He has interest in China, and he was in charge of China because China was handled by two departments. One is Secretary of State, the Office of Secretary of State, and the other was Propaganda Fide, the spread of the faith. So he handled China. However, I don't have the impression that he made an impact there. It was Parolin who drove the talks and drove he didn't push it. I wouldn't like to go into. I don't think anything can happen. I don't know, but I don't know. There is also talk of the other bishops in the Philippines. I forget his name, and somebody says that he's a stronger candidate. There are all possibilities. I really don't know.
Okay. Thank you so much. Everyone is thanking you for this interesting and informative presentation. On behalf of everyone at RSBJ, thanks. And
Thank you for.
we'll keep, I'm sure all of us will know much more about the outcome of the conclave when it happens, thanks to your presentation.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you for paying attention to this arcane subject.